my question is this, because I thought the same thing a while ago. But then I look at what's going on and the fact that, as you said, the Federal Reserve was started in 1913. Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard in 1971, allowing them to go ahead and print and print and print and print. And since that time, every time they get in trouble, pay for the wars, etc., you just print more of the currency. Now, my question to you, Egon, is it potentially now too big to fail? In other words, the numbers are staggering, but I remember thinking that $1 million was staggering. You just mentioned the word quadrillion. Can't we just keep making up new numbers and adding zeros and keeping the currency, keeping the circus going ad infinitum?
Well, there has been no period in history where people have survived just by printing money or increasing the debt. It always comes to an end because at the end of such a period, someone has to pay. You can't just roll it on, because if you don't produce enough goods and services, and that's what keeps the world moving.
Okay.
And if you replace that with printed money, then there'll be Shangri-La. They'll be wonderful. If nobody has to work, and you just print more and more money. But sadly, as I said, history tells us that it have never worked before, and we can take the example of the Roman Empire, and they came to the same situation also, that they needed to print money, and their money printing was, of course, in the silver denarius, replacing the silver by nickel or copper, etc. Right. So the silver content went from 100% to almost 0% in the denarius, the Roman silver coin, and of course the empire collapsed with debts, and then of course then the wars and continued, and then there was civil unrest, and there was misery, and Rome broke up basically. So it just doesn't work, and don't believe that AI is the solution either. AI will make the world more efficient. Firstly, it is at a massive cost, and we don't know if the world can afford that cost. But secondly, AI is going to actually exacerbate the fall, because fewer and fewer people will have jobs. That's inevitable. The AI is make the world more efficient, and people will not be needed. But the people who are not won't be needed. They're not going to get money from the state or from someone. They are just going to be unemployed and miserable, because they will have no useful purpose. So the world population will go down, of course, and there will be a few who control this if they manage to survive. But who benefit from AI. But remember, if you don't have consumers buying all the things that you now are making very cheap and attainable for everyone, so then you've actually killed your market with AI. You make everything so efficient and so cheap, and only a few people need to produce it. But who's going to buy it then if nobody earns any money? So no, it actually doesn't work. So we're actually killing the goose that lays the golden egg here. And so that's and this is, of course, a lot of people are aware of this, and so that it's incredibly dangerous, AI. And I've always said for many years, if you look at the graph of the world population, and you had a relatively steady growth until the 1850s, it reached about 1 billion people then on Earth at that time, and then after 1850 it exploded to now 8 billion from 1. And part of that is, of course, that the energy, oil, and machines.
Yep.
And we have benefited all from it from a material point of view. But if you look at a spike going from 1 to 8 billion of a big sample like the whole of the world population, you know that can only end in one way. It's not going to just stay at the top for a while at 8 and then go up again. No, a spike of that magnitude has to come down by at least 50%, I would say. So the world population will come down from 8, let's say, to 4 billion. Could be more, could be less, but and what's going to cause that? Well, there'll be
war.
The misery that we're going to see now, which is of course a depression, and so there'll be lack of food, there'll be famine, there'll be wars, there'll be disease, social unrest, etc., civil wars maybe also. So that and the people won't, and the people who are losing their jobs there, but people are not can't afford to have children anymore, and this is happening already. Of course, a lot of countries are not increasing the population. So that's how the world will evolve, in my view. And again, I'm not a pessimist by nature. I mean, I love life. I love people. But you're looking at risk. This, in my view, is inevitable. It will take long. Things always take longer than you expect. But at the same time, it's a little bit like, as Hemingway said, how do you go bankrupt? First, gradually,
and then all at once.
Suddenly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so once it starts, it could unravel pretty quickly. So anyway, we will see the beginning of that, and hopefully we'll still be able to chat and enjoy each other's company, at least.
I mean, I was going to say.
Now for the show, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say. So that's the good news. Tell me the bad news. No, in all seriousness, though, people watching this, I don't want them to freak out. What should they be doing? Now, I know you're a big proponent of precious metals preserving wealth. I also know the majority of people I speak to are more interested in Uber Eats and a coffee every day, and they don't think long term, and they don't see the value. Now, I'm not here to convince people, but what I say to people is you need to be educated about potentially what's going on. Now, what you've just spoken about, Egon, is almost too crazy for people to contemplate that this will even happen.
Yeah.
And it's like when the cyclone arrives and they forgot to get the insurance and they say, whoops, and we go, well, we told you the cyclone, the storm was coming. No good after the storm has passed. So, as I say, we're not in the business of convincing people, but how do we get them to understand the inevitability? Because as I said just before, it almost sounds ridiculous to think that this could happen in this modern world.
Yes, it is, and especially with the massive amount of affluence we should have. But sadly, the difference between the rich and the poor is increasing by the day. And that in itself, of course, will cause problems for the world, because there's a point, especially when you get empty stomachs, that's the point when the people start protesting and complaining about the rich. So you should definitely not flaunt your wealth or show anyone that you have any money, because the rich will be hated by the majority. Remember, so we are, I can say almost sadly, catering for a very small group here of people who have some savings and therefore can afford to buy a little bit of gold or a little bit of silver. But the majority don't even know what gold and silver is. And they would never have thought of ever buying it or saving in gold or silver. What they don't understand is that you don't have to be very rich to buy gold or silver, especially as silver is still, at today, it's still under $100 an ounce. It was $20 a couple of years ago. So it has gone up a lot. But nevertheless, if the people in Venezuela, let's say 25 years ago, when Venezuela was, the Bolivar was about on par with the dollar, and it was a strong economy. If they had a little bit, an ounce of silver, an ounce of gold, when the crisis hit and the hyperinflation started, that just a little bit in, let's say, silver would have saved them and brought them some little bit of spare capital that they could use in bad times. But of course, nobody thinks it would be enough. But when hyperinflation hits, it is enough to have just a little bit of it. And so therefore, I would still advise people today, rather than spending unnecessary money on things that you don't need really. Put it away, whatever you can. A few dollars here or there, or pounds or euros, and then that with what happens at the end of a monetary era, and we don't know. The world has never experienced a monetary era of this magnitude, of this amount of debt and this amount of deficits and this amount of trouble that we have in the world. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But what we do know is that the value of almost all currencies in the world has, since 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, has gone down by 99%. So we have the final 1% to go, but the 1% is 100% from here, as I keep on saying, and therefore the value of money will implode. And for the ones who only hold fiat money, paper money, it means that they'll be totally worthless. I met a man from Yugoslavia 3-4 years ago in Switzerland, and he had a small restaurant, and he told my friends who were with us, he recognized me from the gold industry. He was interested in gold, so he said, "You should listen to this man because I've experienced hyperinflation in Yugoslavia, and I had some gold, and I could leave Yugoslavia, come to Switzerland, and start a little restaurant. But most of my friends and family, they lost everything."
Oh, wow.
So it's only when you have experienced it that you realize what can happen. And then I don't think he had a lot of gold, but he had enough to start again. Because he was a wise man. But the majority will not do that. Majority will not buy gold and silver, although, as I say, they should, stop spending on things you don't need. Spend a little bit on if you can't afford gold, silver is it's going to go up more than silver, at least in the short term. A lot more, silver is going to go up a lot more than gold in the short term. So have some silver if you can afford it. And because it's going to be incredibly useful. But if you don't have enough money to save at all, then what is so important then is family and friends. A strong family and a strong group of friends that will get you a long way in life, and then everybody helps each other.